from Michigan for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. The pretense of today's hearing is that certain risks don't matter for companies or the families and retirees who invested in them. And apparently today, a company's social or governance practices, like whether they have effective policies for preventing and addressing sexual harassment, don't matter. However, when the FTC chair was here before this committee, it was obvious that everyone cared. Treasurer, to effectively carry out their responsibilities, what types of information, risks, or opportunities must fiduciaries consider? And I'm so sorry if you've been asked this question, but I think it's important to repeat why these factors are important.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Let me first start by explaining why we need new data. About 50 years ago, in 1975, the S&P 500 had about 17% of the value in the S&P 500 in intangible assets. Today, that number is about 90%. So the nature of value of companies have changed. 50 years ago, you could look at a car company in Michigan and say, well, how many employees do they have? How many cars are they producing a year? How many factories they have? You could look at these numbers. But today, Apple, the value of Apple is not $1 trillion because of the number of iPhones they're producing. It's based on their reputation, on their intellectual property. And these are things that are subject to additional new risks, reputational risk, litigation risks. These are things that we need to have this information for because we're making lots of investments in these companies, and we want to know, we don't want to put our clients' money in investments at risk.
No, you answered my next question. I mean, the anti-ESG movement is funded by the fossil fuel industry, which is poisoning my community. Figures like Leonard, Leo, and I think Peter Thiel, who are all seeking to line their pockets, to protect their profits by opening a new front in what many are calling the culture war, right? The issue might be fabricated, but the stakes are truly, really real for people not only within the company, but for so many of the folks that are impacted. The retirement savings for hardworking families and public funding are all on the line. After Texas passed their anti-ESG legislation in 2021, for example, disrupting the municipal bond market, look it up, public borrowing costs increased by roughly $400 million after they passed the anti-ESG legislation. Indiana's budget office has estimated that forcing pension funds to divest from firms or funds that use ESG factors could reduce returns by $6.7 billion. Again, documented. Treasurer, can you discuss how attempts to prevent the use of environmental, social, and governance factors can cost the public and the retirees?
Yeah. So let's say there was talk earlier about these small mom and pop companies out there. What we're talking about today is our large publicly traded companies.
That's right. The
reason we have disclosures is because in the past they didn't disclose things and defrauded investors. Now, we have risks for us investors. We need to know what they are. If there's an individual small company providing a widget for a large international company, we should have access to know, is that widget made with child labor? Is it made with slave labor? Because that presents a real risk to our investment in a company like Apple. Just think of all those people who have iPhones. The number of people, if they found out those iPhones were being made by slave Uyghur labor in China, by children, there were people who would switch from iPhones to Androids. It'd be a big risk to the company. That's why this access to information for reputational risk and litigation risk.
Look, it's very obvious.
So
it's about shielding them from accountability. Let's just be honest. This is shielding them from accountability. If a company is facing significant climate-related risks, investors need to know. Period. Why not?
If you're an insurance company.
Be honest. I don't know why we're trying to help them hide this information. It's ridiculous. Treasurer, last question. Can you discuss some of the issues? The climate risks always come to mind for folks, but for climate risk to executive compensation, that shareholders' proposals can force companies to disclose, and why those issues would be of interest to investors. I know it's clear, but I think folks, I love how you give examples. I think the American people need to understand implementation-wise why this matters.
There was talk about materiality. So not every company is impacted by climate risk as others. If you're an insurance company insuring homes along the Florida coast, as an investor, we want to know that risk. If you're in agriculture and there are droughts or floods coming into your farm areas, we need to know your exposure there because those are real risks out there.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I yield.
Gentlelady's has yielded back. With that, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Muser, is recognized.